very much.
Thank you very much. As a CEO, I am responsible for a high-tech company. I am concerned that in the near future, we may not be able to hire enough scientists and engineers for our company to remain a leader in the electronics industry. In the United States, too few students are graduating with STEM degrees: science, technology, engineering, and math. And technology is advancing at lightning speed. Studies show that many students decide at a very early age whether or not they like math and science, as early as 4th grade. And unfortunately, far too many boys and even more girls are deciding that math and science are not cool or that they're too hard. Unfortunately, this problem is compounded by the fact that these days most schools don't have shop classes where students can build things and get really excited about the technology behind them. Now, to overcome this, some students are participating in robotics clubs that are gaining in popularity, or other students are part of the makerspace movement, such as we see at Vocademy here in Riverside. But much more needs to be done to show students that STEM is fun and really a good opportunity for a career. Now, I'm going to share a case study, and then I'm going to give you 3 actions that you can take to help encourage students, to show students that STEM is fun. My father, Marlan Bourns, was an only child who grew up on the farm near Detroit. Between attending his one-room school and doing his chores, my father enjoyed building mechanical things. This is an example of a shooting gallery that he built that actually had ducks that moved along and then fell over when he hit them with a BB gun. He loved to go to town with his parents to pick up the latest version of Popular Mechanics or Mechanics Illustrated, and he often sent away for plans on how to build projects. An example are these automobiles that he built at age 16 that are big enough for adults to ride in. One is gasoline-powered, and the other one is electric-powered. He was way ahead of his times. He took great pains in carefully forming the metal bodies on these cars and painting them. And in fact, his favorite class in school were his shop classes: machine shop, metalworking, and woodworking. In fact, this continued when he went to the University of Michigan, where he learned to operate just about every piece of equipment in their physics department machine shop. He got a reputation for being able to translate his ideas into hardware. And in fact, a lot of the other students asked him to help build their projects. In fact, even some of the professors did. Because of his ability to make things, he was recruited during World War II to go out to Caltech to make sensors for the war effort. And in fact, this gave him the ability to, after the war was over, make precision sensors. So while he was out in California, my mother, Rosemary Miller, was graduating also from the University of Michigan with a degree in education, and during the summer she worked at a jewelry store as a manager. When my mother was close to graduation in June of 1947, my father decided to surprise her by driving all the way from California to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to attend her graduation and also to propose to her. So 2 weeks later, they were married, and they spent their honeymoon driving back from Michigan to California, also with my mother's parents, because my father wanted to show that she was going to have a proper place to live out in California. So they started their company. They founded the Bourns Laboratories in this single-car garage behind their home in Pasadena. My father worked on some of the new product designs and how to make them, while my mother kept the books and also kept very careful management over the inventory of materials and parts, thanks to the good education she got and also to her experience of managing a jewelry store where you can't lose anything in a jewelry store. Their first piece of equipment that they purchased was from Sears and Roebuck, and it was for a drill press. And they brought it home from Sears in the back seat, the rumble seat of their car. They hired the first employees. The next door neighbor was a draftsman, so he was hired. And then a couple of engineers in the area helped to design some of the first families of products. The very first order that they received was from Consolidated Vultee in San Diego for one of everything that they built. And in fact, one of the engineers said, we'd like to have you build some board-on pressure transducers. My father said, sure, no problem. And after pretty much everybody had left the meeting, my father turned to the engineer and he said, what is a board-on tube? But he'd already committed to deliver all these parts in 6 weeks. So with that information, he was successful. Now, to test these parts, and save money, my father built a lot of their test equipment. They used this oscilloscope to do the electrical testing, and they used my mother's stove and refrigerator to do the hot and cold environmental testing. Because they had to make sure that these parts would work well in the harsh environment in aerospace conditions. In 1950, the Riverside Chamber of Commerce and the city of Riverside paid for the cost of moving the company to Riverside. And this is a sample of the first parts that they made. In fact, the very first part was a vane potentiometer to measure the position of the aircraft relative to the wind and feed that signal to the pilot. And then they also made a linear motion potentiometer to tell what the position of the rudder and the elevators are. In 1969, my parents were amazed when parts that they had built here in Riverside helped the lunar landing module land gently on the surface of the moon, and the astronauts walked around breathing their oxygen through the pressure sensors that had been also built here in Riverside at Bourns Laboratories. And proudly, 67 years later, the foundation, the values that they built, the good ideas keep our company innovating today. Now, I'd like to share a couple of points from my case study. One of them is my father became interested in building things at a very young age. His favorite classes were his shop classes where he could make things and do a good professional job. And these formed the foundation upon which my father and my mother built a worldwide company to make precision sensors and high-tech electronic components. So we can show students that STEM is cool and really a good career is ahead of them. So my first action that I'd recommend is to find a STEM event and learn about it, get involved. So just the last 2 days, we had over 4,500 students come to a STEM event here in Riverside where the students learned how to use microscopes. They learned about the cool things that robots can do. They were able to sit in a F-117 stealth fighter and sit in a space capsule. They learned about the latest generation of electric vehicles, and they were also able to pilot this little underwater remote-controlled vehicle on an obstacle course. In addition, the scientists at General Atomics put on a terrific science show that talked about the principles of electricity and magnetism. And then yesterday afternoon, Dr. Pam Clute, Assistant Vice Chancellor at UC Riverside, talked to 300 students to give them ideas that they can use in their classroom about math and technology to add depth to their classes. What I learned over the years in attending Dr. Clute's Teachers Conference is that teachers really appreciate having scientists and engineers visit their classroom to just tell the students what they do and how much fun it is, how important it is. So this brings me to my next action, and that is to take something that you're interested in, do some research on it, and then present it in the classroom. This is a patent that my father developed back in 1952 here in Riverside for the trim pot trimming potentiometer, which still today, 62 years later, is the most important and most profitable product line that the company has. So I have been inspired by patents. My father had over 100 patents, so I decided to talk in the classrooms about patents. So earlier this year, I went to the STEM Academy here in Riverside, and I started by just asking them, how many of you have applied for a patent? And no one raised their hand, and so I said, why not? And so one little girl said, well, I'm too young to apply for a patent. And I said, there's no age requirement for a patent. And then a little boy said, it's too expensive. And I said, an individual can file a provisional patent for $65. And if you have a good idea, wouldn't it be great to patent that? Now, they got excited, and so I challenged them to be the first in their class to file for a patent. And I said, it's easy to do. And I then proceeded to put this figure up on the screen, and I asked them what it was. Do any of you know what this is? In fact, they read the title on it, and it was invented back in 1952 by G.D. Mistral, and the name on the patent says velvet-type fabric and method of producing same. Any guess yet? Well, they didn't have... Oh, you've read. Yes, indeed. This is the patent for Velcro, and in fact, it was invented by a Swiss entrepreneur who was walking through the fields and found that he had burrs in his socks and picked them up and saw they had little hooks on it sticking to his socks, and he thought this would be a great fastener. So he went out and patented it. What is great about this is that this patent has only the two figures, and the text is only a page and a half long. So it's a great illustration, a very simple illustration of a patent. So it also shows students that you need to have some level of artistic ability to be able to draw your idea, and you also have to be able to explain it in writing, as this page and a half patent shows. So the upper left blue portion talks about this patent and the good idea compared to the prior art. So in fact, the very first prior art for this patent was back in the early 1900s, 50 years earlier, and it was for the use of shark skin to close belts, to fasten belts. Now, shark skin, if you ever pet a shark, they're smooth one way and rough the other way, and if you take two pieces and put it together, the little teeth kind of stick together. So to differentiate his invention compared to the prior art, he said his patent was made of man-made material, not natural. With nylon had just been invented a few years earlier. The next portion in yellow, this is kind of tedious stuff that describes the figures that we saw on the earlier page. But what's really exciting is the upper right green portion. This is where the money is. These are the 4 claims that Mr. G.D. Mistral wanted to protect, so that if anyone tried to copy his invention, they would have to pay him money. Now, this really got the kids' attention, and they got excited. So the next action you can take, number 3, is to take a project that you can actually have kids build, because that's what really gets them excited. So I'd like to have you reach under your chairs, and you will find a little plastic bag, and in it, and it's going to either be on the left side or the right side, stuck on your legs of your chair, or right in the center under your chair. So take the bag, and in that, you're going to find some parts. Now, I was very blessed to have about 30 people here last night, educators and students, to pass these all out. So everybody should have one, even up in the balcony. So take the parts out, and you'll find the heart of this is a AA battery and a magnet stuck to the end of it. So please put that right on the center of your washer. And then take the nut, the hex nut, and put it right on top. And with a steady hand, maybe we can do this. So now take your piece of wire, and you see the part that looks kind of like the top of a heart. It has a little point, and I want to have you put that right down right into the center of that nut. And if you hold it just right, and you can put this on your the arm of your chair, it should start spinning. Yeah, baby. And if it doesn't, go back to the instructions and see what it says. So this is a good example of a hands-on project that students can do. It really, their eyes light up when they do something like this. And so the bottom line is that we can show students that STEM is really very cool and something that they can look forward to in their career. And each one of us can do our part to make sure that in the future we have plenty of STEM graduates. I think this is an idea worth sharing, and I hope you do too. Yeah. Thank you.